Oh my god.
Make sure you stick around until the end. There's some really important flood safety information.
Welcome to Better Preparedness. This episode is an ode to the African rains. You hear about drought and you hear about water scarcity in just about every part of Africa, but until you've lived here, you don't really feel those seasons, those cycles. Having lived in Kenya and Morocco as well, so that's East Africa, North Africa, and now down here in Southern Africa, you really see how life is governed by the rains. And the thing is, rain is critical for drinking water, for crops, for irrigation of fields, for the wildlife and everything that depends on it. So much depends on these rains, but they're not a given. When you live in northern North America, for example, in Canada, well, sure, you might get a few low snow seasons, but you never really get a winter without snow, and that snow then is what then drains into the rivers in the springtime. Here in Africa, you'll probably have about 1, maybe 2 wet seasons, and that's a bit of your equivalent of winter. But the thing is that they're not a given, and you may get them, you may not get them. Where I've lived, I've had a chance to experience waiting for that November rain season, but it just didn't come. And then suddenly you've got people frantic because, well, they planted and nothing grew, so they wasted the money investing in renting a tractor and sowing the fields and everything. But that's not a given. So what is this? Well, this is the big rain. This is the big rain. Now, South Africa, especially around the Gauteng, so the Johannesburg, Pretoria area, was really facing a water shortage again. And we've had that the last couple of years. And there's been some really big droughts, and especially Cape Town near a situation called Day Zero, where the dams were just simply empty of water. Well, Pretoria and Johannesburg, they were under water scarce situations, so you had to be very careful with how much water you used. And we'd just come off of about almost five months with almost no rain, and a heat spell of about 3 weeks where it was always about 35 degrees. I gotta go get my umbrella because I'm getting rained on. Thought for a second there I had a brief break in the rain. Sure glad I have this old Kenya Airways umbrella. But yeah, we just came off about 3 weeks of a heat spell, a heat wave, and with really no end in sight. And then suddenly, out of nowhere really, but 6 days ago, the big rain happened. Now, nobody was really predicting this was going to happen. Now, you have to understand how much of a trickle this is normally behind me. This is a reservoir, but it's normally just a trickle for most of the year. But now it's this raging torrent, and it is just coming down in buckets here. But the thing is that much of Africa, when you drive these countries, you can drive tens of thousands of kilometers and hardly any of the riverbeds actually have water in them. Most of the time they just look like sand riverbeds, as if sand is what normally flows through them. But maybe once or twice a year you get the big one, and that rain just turns little stream beds into raging torrents. And what used to be normally the way you get to school, the way you get to work, well, suddenly that route is completely impassable. And if you enjoy doing safari drives and game drives, well, suddenly regions can be cut off because it's just simply too dangerous to be on the roads. And well, this is what it is. It's big. The water is kind of a big brown color. Well, that's the soil. And those soils nutrients will be carried away in downstream somewhere. And we're about 600 kilometers inland from any of the oceans where we are here, probably even more. And well, all of this rain will slowly make its way eventually down to either reservoirs or down to the ocean. The thing about this region is you've got 2 seasons of color. You have to imagine that 3 weeks ago, all the grasses were dead. The ground was just beige and sandy and dusty. And that's when you drove the roads, it was incredibly dusty. But now everything is there's this kind of this explosion of green that you have when you get the big rains. And it's really quite amazing because you suddenly forget that 3-4 weeks ago, it was absolutely bone dry here. What you're seeing right now, wilderness-wise, it's definitely South Africa, and kind of the African continent, is the dryness, the incredible dryness of this landscape. And there's nothing really growing, but we got a couple little rains, just enough to kind of get things going. But then, boy, with these big rains, that's huge. That's the thing about preparedness is, you can want to build on an area that is always dry. You're not too far, you're not too close to a riverbed. You think, God, it's pretty safe to build here. And unfortunately, it's often the poorer people who end up building close to those waterways because, well, that's the land that's available. And it's probably available because, well, it floods from time to time. Is it this year? Is it next year? Is it the year before? Is it 5 years down the road? Well, you never know. But when it really does flood like this, that's when a lot of people's houses, people's livelihoods can really be impacted. And it's a sad situation to see, and we see that time and time again here in Southern Africa, East Africa, well, pretty much any part of Africa. When it really, really rains, often the land has no way of absorbing all of that sudden water, so it has to go somewhere, and then it usually goes to the riverbed and sweeps things away. And we've seen that a lot of times, but generally speaking, it's a good thing, but it is a bit much of a good thing, and there will be a lot of people impacted by this. But it's a pretty exciting time. You can see the smiles on people. Everyone's talking about the rain, and well, here it is.
All right, now we've gotten talking about the floods, the big rains in Africa. It's really important that everyone is flood safety aware. Now, you can start by looking at it, for example, your home. Are you in a flood zone? Are you in a floodplain? Sometimes your city authorities can tell you, where are you in terms of any flood potential for your area? But it's not just the sort of general area that can flood. It can also be your house because of the drainage, eavesdropping, the foundation, and how the water gets channeled away from your house and from your home for that matter, because it can still impact apartments as well. But make sure you do your research. Do you have flood insurance? And again, how does that come into play? What are the conditions of coverage for that flood insurance? And then think of on the road. Be very careful if you're out driving and the water starts to rise, because it doesn't take water much higher than, say, this hand right now that's about 4 or 5 inches tall. If that water is moving, especially, that can wash away a car. It really doesn't take very much to wash away a car or for you to lose control in aquaplane. But again, it hides debris, it hides potholes, it hides the edge of the road, it hides the curb. You can heavily damage your vehicle and then strand your vehicle. Now the water continues to rise and your vehicle is toast or waterlogged. But you won't really recover a vehicle that gets flooded. Also think of it from an emergency perspective. Find out what the provisions are from your local authorities. Go onto their websites, read their documentation, read up how they evacuate, how they announce evacuations, what are the evacuation routes. And what do you need to do from an emergency perspective of your family? Do you have an emergency plan for your family? Do you have copies of key documents off-site so that if ever your house gets damaged while you're away, you still have copies of those key documents so that you can get the insurance claim going, you can get the recovery post-disaster. One of the challenges quite often people are presented with is if they're told to evacuate, and you should always evacuate immediately when you're told to do so, because things get full in terms of the roads, in terms of the evacuation routes. But you want to make sure the people you care for, or if you have pets as well, that you're ready for that in terms of helping move them to a safer place or to a safer shelter if there's a shelter for pets and so on. So just make sure you're really flood safety aware and knowledgeable, not just you, but talk it out with your household, your loved ones, your children. Maybe they could be encountering a flooding situation, walking home from school or biking home from school or whatever it is. Just make sure you're flood aware and proactive and, well, prepared, right? All right. Thanks for watching Better Preparedness. Learn as much as you can and be safe.
If you like this episode, and click that subscribe button. Thanks for watching Better Preparedness, and stay tuned for the next episode.